So can we get started? Joan?
Now we can, yes.
Okay, cool. Welcome, everybody. Good to see you again. I haven't seen you since January when we were in the middle of winter. So whole different ball of wax now that I think spring is amongst us. And to that end, I tried to put this backdrop behind me to be a little springy. So tonight we're going to talk about the ag retention chapter, which is the first priority subject chapter we're going to talk about. I'm going to go over the comp plan, basically the table of contents quickly, and then at the end of the meeting, we will have time for public comment and Board of Supervisor comment on the materials. So let me bring up first. So just really quickly to go back over the table of contents with you and where we are. So introduction, we sort of did months and months and months ago when we looked at it. I'm going to be sharing with you, which I'm going to explain in a minute, part of this chapter, which is basically going to be the matrix of all your recommendations and actions. And what we thought we'd do is when you're going through your priority subject chapters, as we're talking about the recommendations and actions, I can open up the matrix at the same time and we can just fill in who the party responsible for carrying out, the primary party responsible for carrying out the action would be, and then also what the general time frame of the action is. I think it's better to do that now rather than wait till the end after we have a bunch of actions and it's more difficult to remember what we thought the priorities would be. So I'll explain that chapter in a second. And as you can see, we're right here on this first priority chapter called agricultural retention. So this matrix, which I'm going to have open at the same time as the chapter, I did not send it to you because I just talked to people in the township just yesterday who thought maybe it was a good idea. And you see it says working draft all over it. So basically what you're seeing is this will be, I like to call it kind of your cheat sheet cliff notes of your plan. And if you need to just know what your goal was or what your recommendation and actions were, you can just open up this chapter without having to go through the whole plan. So with that said, we're going to have the vision in the chapter. We're going to have the subject areas and the goals listed. You see, it's just a shell right now. And then what we're interested in for tonight is we're going to have this implementation matrix. And basically this talks about how the goals will be achieved with the recommendations and actions. And it'll match the words you saw in the chapter, the what, the how to. And then we're also going to be talking about words tonight by whom. And that will be the primary parties responsible for getting the action implemented. It won't be every single party responsible. It'll be basically who does this start with and maybe who's the primary organization that has to be partnered with to make this happen. So that's the by whom. And just for starters, I went ahead and just started listing some by whoms and some abbreviations that we can start putting in the table. And then there's the when column, and that goes into when will this recommendation start? Is it basically an immediate recommendation that I labeled as A? We don't have to use these labels, but I just labeled them as A to act on. And you would basically start the recommendation at least within the next 2 years of adopting the plan. It may not be done in the next 2 years, but at least to be started. Is it something to consider acting on? That would be more of a 3 to 5 year time frame. Is it something to explore, which would be more of a longer term time frame, probably a 3 to 5 time frame, or just researching and exploring it once the plan is adopted because you're not really sure? Or is it an ongoing thing that you already do or you want to do in the future and you're just going to keep doing it? So how this matrix will look when you put it, this is going to look familiar to you from the materials you saw tonight. So what will be the ag retention? And then if you remember from tonight's materials, under the what's, there's these recommendations, they're goals / recommendations that we've talked about many times in past meetings. And then the how, which we've also talked about many times in past meetings, have now turned into the how in this particular column. So then the how to will be just a really quick summary. Maybe it'll say zoning, maybe it'll say collaborative effort, maybe it'll say forum, that sort of thing. But this is where we're going to put those abbreviations. Consider an ordinance measures, for example, to support agriculture. Well, that'll probably be the Planning Commission. Would probably initiate that. So we would put PC in here, I'm just going to put it in here, for example, just to get this going. So I just went ahead and filled in the table. And again, all the words you're seeing here are the exact words that we worked on from October to December last year. So these words have not changed. You're just seeing them in a different manner. So with that being said, we are going to then go through the agri-retention chapter. And the goal for tonight is to get through this entire chapter because we have other chapters to move on to next month. Namely, we'll talk about natural resources as green infrastructure next month. And then the trail people from the Planning Commission plan to be at the meeting next month to talk about what they've created in draft form for the trail and the pedestrian facilities chapter. So those will be our next chapter. So this is say what you need to say for this chapter, and then we will move on. So starting off, does anybody have any questions before we get moving about anything I've talked about? Okay. So starting off, whatever we call these, we can call these things whatever we're going to call them for now. We'll just say a hierarchy. The first hierarchy is a general goal. And so we talk about what is the whole aim of this entire chapter as a priority chapter. Does anybody have any questions or comments about this generalized goal, which was taken from all that other wording that you all reviewed from October to December?
So Janine, I have a process question, and then it relates to the words on the page here. So I have some edits that I'd like to suggest for this. I did not put them in a PDF document. I saw Donna, who reviewed some material, did put all of her comments in. Is this in PDF Word? Okay, so you're able to do them in here. So we can just shout out some edits here. I did not give them back to you. I did not have time since yesterday. So do you want us to just propose some edits here now and we'll talk about it?
Go for it, and I'll just type them in. Then we'll have it done.
Okay. Then before I give the edits, the other thing I thought would be helpful to show would be our overall goal, for the comprehensive plan. And I remember we added words like sustainability. I don't remember what it's called in comp plan speak.
The vision right here.
Yeah, the vision. So I thought it would be helpful for all of us to anchor ourselves with that vision to make sure that we're incorporating that vision in the goals. So do you mind if we just rest there for a second at the vision?
Sure. And I can cut and paste temporarily the vision into that other
just document, so that we're always consistent. Just so that all these priority areas, in my opinion, that all of these priority areas support and tie back to the vision. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So like the vision just in comparison, just so everybody can see it.
Yeah, because we use some cracking words in the vision and I would hate to leave them behind. I remember Jerry.
Bigger, so it looks different.
Yeah. Okay.
So basically this is the vision.
Thank you.
And this is the same vision that was put forth at the public meeting in January. And it had changed ever so slightly, a couple words based on, what we were doing last year in some of the interviews. But this is the one we presented to the public.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
All right.
Hey, Kathy, Paul's here. I just want to let you know I'm late. I came in late.
Okay, thanks, Paul.
Sorry about that.
Yep. You'll have your demerits and the ruler later on.
Okay.
Yep, no problem. All right. So, great. Thank you, Janine. I don't know anybody if this is helpful for you, but it is for me. So I thought that the goal here, the words that I think I'd like us to talk about. Let's see. So it's the heritage and character, is tied to the identity. I mean, we don't have to make this one by one, but words that I thought were missing from the goal that came through the workshops and stuff were our township as a destination, and And I think it's a destination for parks. I think it's a destination for the ag. I think it's a destination for the rural character. So the word destination I thought could be helpful in here. We also in this chapter, there's a lot of great references to scenic, views, which I think also ties into, the beauty of our township. And then I have a question. The definition of development, is that the best word, to put in here? Because I know it's commercial development, resident, development has multiple meanings to whoever the reader is.
It meant any kind of development that complements and reinforces ag. So I guess the goal was, since agriculture is really interspersed throughout the entire township in these loose groupings, but not in one part of the township, any one area of the township somewhere has some other use going on, whether it's commercial, mostly residential, but in some cases there are, scattered commercial or maybe a scattered institutional use or that
Mhm.
sort of thing, but mostly residential. So it's just more of a anything that's going to be happening in the future.
Any development. Yeah. So I guess the word any, maybe some kind of broader word before the word development. Because as a farmer, development is a trigger word. Right? It doesn't sound like a good
What if we replace development with growth?
growth. That's moving in a better direction. And just, I want to give a heads up to everybody. I'm going to have a lot to say about the goal, and then, I'll be quiet. I've just come off of 5 days of heavy editing on a big dossier for the government, so unfortunately, you guys are getting me all like warmed up. So the word destination in here, I think sustainable was a great word in our vision that I'd like to also see in here. And not just an industry, but when we talk about industry, so viable or a vibrant economy, making it economically feasible, and supporting, the ability for people to make money farming is something else that should come through here.
I'm just putting words in. These might not
Yeah. Yeah, if I had a Word document, I would have gone in and redlined it for you, but I just couldn't fight with PDF this afternoon. I got lazy, sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine. Well, this is good. Everybody's hearing it anyway,
Good.
because it's supposed to be a group thing. So,
All right, so that's all the beating up I'm gonna do of the goal. I don't know if anybody else has things. Well, I take it back. I have one more word. I also think future. And I actually think this word is one that we should think about for every single one, because this is a 10-year plan. And things are going to change.
I don't know if that's where you wanted the word future.
Well, it's good for right there.
Okay.
Thanks.
Kathy, I get your point of development and growth, both which have a common connotation of human, making more impact on the land, which is not what we're striving for. So future utilization of the land that both complements and forces agriculture kind of shifts us over from this standard growth and development. Yeah, so that's
nice.
My 2 cents there.
Barry.
I get your trigger words.
Yeah, that's a trigger word. Yeah, good. Thank you. Because we're not going to be able to grow any more land, right? Mark Twain.
That is correct.
Okay. Yeah. So take what we have and utilize it the best way we can.
Good.
All right.
Okay. So moving down to, so then if you remember from the table of contents you saw, how this plan has been set up is there's a very, cursor's jumping around, sorry. There's a very brief background section And the background section is really just supposed to be kind of meat and potatoes, what you need to know. Sometimes these plans, and I'm sure you've seen other comprehensive plans, go on for pages and pages and pages and pages of background information. And that background information, programs change, background information changes, dates change, and all of that. And so sometimes it's a lot of information that's sort of overwhelming, but doesn't really help a municipality. So if you remember, we all talked about, and this goes back months and months ago to one of the first meetings, saying, let's just put in the chapters what we actually need in the chapters that explains where we're headed, and not put in an encyclopedia of information that people can Google. So with that said, it starts out to just talk about why we're even talking about this, and basically why was it chosen as a priority area, and that's because of all the community input that we had done.
Yep.
So I don't know if you have any comments, anybody has any comments about the community input here, or how it's phrased, or what community input, how it was discussed.
So the methodology will be explained in more detail above. So, Donna had some questions about the methodology, which she didn't have the benefit of everything else. She did say if we need ends in there to make the percentages meaningful, but those are nits. I think from a themes, I was okay with all those. We can clean those up later, Janine.
Okay. We'll be talking about it here when you're talking about methodology.
Yeah.
In chapter 1, which we didn't do yet. And then there'll be a data dump.
Yep.
In the appendix.
Yes. Then all the numbers will make sense.
Yeah, then it'll be a data dump, but the methodology, yes, will be explained here. It was deliberately not explained in the chapter because we were trying not to be uber repetitive of other chapters.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think that all makes sense to me, because people will most likely look at this document online, and then it'll have links for all that stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
There were other concerns. So the other thing that occurred to me in the second paragraph, it was not just lands, but then moving around the township as a farmer, as well as residents driving along with farm equipment. And so I didn't know if we wanted to reference roads.
Isn't that covered later?
I think so. That's a great question. I was just lumping it into concerns raised by the residents and trying to remember the concerns that were expressed by residents in those workshop calls.
I think if you put it everywhere, then it's going to take out some of the continuity in roads.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's fair.
So get rid of this then?
Yeah, I was just trying to bring the voice of the resident in, more of their concerns.
I think it's important to be discussed, but I think roads is a better place to discuss it, so that we're discussing everything to do with roads and we don't have roads in 14 different places.
Chopping it up. Yep, that's fair, Chuck.
Yeah, what we might want to do later on is after we get through the chapters, have some references to a different chapter if there is a sensitivity to something like that. But I think let's wait until we see what the whole document is.
All right. So
Just
reasonable.
write it in here for reference.
Yep.
I know it's sloppy. I'm just putting it in here.
Yeah, it's all right.
Oh dear.
Sister Kathleen will turn that off.
Wow, that was an epic fail in typing.
You're fine.
Okay, I'm
Okay.
just gonna put that there, just for now. Okay, then moving into context. So this has been divided up into overall context, more from a county-wide perspective, and then we move into existing conditions, more from a township perspective. I think it's important in this section to have context, just to look at each of these elements in the bigger realm of how it functions in the county, just to give an understanding of where Franklin falls without going crazy about it. So, and this also gets back into Landscapes 3, which, since this project is funded under Landscapes 3, we have to talk about it
Yeah.
somewhat. So it does tie it back in without having it. Sometimes Landscapes 3 is sort of talked about off by itself, and it doesn't really have any relevance then to the particular subject area. It sort of gets lost in the shuffle, so it just brings it back in quickly. And we looked at the ADC, the Ag Development Council, has information about agriculture in the county, countywide. And so that's what we looked at, for a lot of this information, to just kind of ground what's going on in the county, not so much the township.
Okay.
But I don't know if you all have anything to say about this, or it looks good.
I don't see anything about wineries, which is a pretty substantial portion of our ag.
Well, there's a growing trend in the larger region for vineyards and related
There we go.
malt production,
Okay,
and barley crops and related malt production.
got it. Thank you.
In the
I have a quick
ADC
question, Janine, for you on this section. It was unclear to me when you said land use, if you were like, we have an agricultural residential zoning, AR zoning, and we also have just land that's just farmed. So I was unclear as to how you divvied that up. So help.
When I said land use, and I think this will become clearer when the future land use chapter is written, it just means the physical use of the land, regardless of any regulations that are on the land. So, AKA existing land use. And then moved on to have one sentence about the actual zoning in the township. I think that'll be clearer again in the context of once you see that chapter. And it starts talking about use and defining land use.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
So moving on to existing conditions, now we start to get into existing conditions in the township. And these are some bits of information that we got from some of the mapping that the township had done, and then the mapping, that we had done. And then just some information that we got on, background information from particularly some of the interviews with ag about some of the examples of agriculture that's in the township. And this is where we do mention vineyards, cattle, beef. And then I know there's crops. I'm not sure what type of crops are in the township. And then if there's other ag uses that we should be listing. And then also we weren't really sure about what kind of ag related businesses other than wine tasting are going on in the township right now that we should be listing.
Yeah, so cut flowers, there's someone who does a cut flowers business. In fact, there's probably like 2 of them coming. Herbs, I would say cut flowers and herbs. We don't, speaking of herbs, we don't talk about marijuana or hemp. And over the next 10 years, that's going to be something, I'm sure people will be talking about in the township.
We do have hemp farmers.
Oh, we do have hemp. All right, good. So we should put hemp on there. Thanks, Joan.
And what about the greenhouse, the flowers that the Amish families grow?
Yeah.
And then,
It's not just flowers, isn't it? Also vegetable plants? Joan?
yes, and then we also have North Creek Nursery that does all the plants for rain gardens and that type of setup.
Yep.
Veggie, flowers, and then it sounds like there's shrubs also.
I know the Amish crossroad from me sell firewood. I don't know if that counts.
It's a secondary business, yeah.
I think that's a really interesting ad.
Timber harvesting is always a big argument about ag versus
Mhm.
industry. And the Attorney General has ruled that it is ag. So selling firewood would seem to be ag also. I think that's fair.
Where do solar farms fall?
Generally speaking, not ag. I would just call them a regular, more of a commercial situation. I mean, they could certainly be on an agricultural property, but I don't know that I would, certainly not agritourism. I guess they're, instead of saying an agricultural related business, they might be sort of a supplemental business, to help support the agricultural property.
And there's a place for that down below, Chuck. I think that's an interesting thing to consider. There's another section that talks about secondary ag businesses.
Right.
Which we're blending them here in this.
Yeah, we're blending them here.
Yeah.
I'll have to separate them back out, but yeah, I think ag related, I think that is more of like cut flowers and that sort of thing. And then secondary ag, that may or may not be ag related. That could be machinery repair. That could be, as you're all saying, I don't know, a solar farm. Sometimes agricultural uses have cell towers because it pays a lot of money in leases.
Wind farms,
What was that?
wind farms.
Wind farms. Yeah.
I don't know about here, but out in the Midwest, it's a good source of income for farmers.
I'd also like to mention that equestrian uses, if a farm does horseback riding lessons, there are some townships that require them to be in a commercial zoning rather than ag. So can we put that in, that it's an agricultural use? It was in the last comprehensive plan as well.
Or is it currently happening in the township, horseback riding lessons?
Well, yeah, it is on the small farms, but like if we ever, because we have the 5-star coming in Maryland, there's a possibility now that we could get a big equestrian facility here in our township. And if they do lessons, there are some townships that deem that that's commercial, not agriculture. So somehow we have to get it in here that we believe that it's an ag-related business, not commercial. And they require them to put their facility on commercial land, which is ridiculous for horses.
Yeah.
Would we also put horse boarding in here?
Yeah, you can include any, yeah. I mean, somehow we'll have to phrase it so it's boarding, lessons, that sort of thing, that it's not commercial, it's ag related.
And I was trying to put everything that's existing happening in the township right now. So is it fair to say all of these are happening in some variety in the township right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Janine, I just want to add something about solar for the group to think about.
Sure.
I know a lot of our goals below have to do with preserving farmland in the township, and having worked with the preservation at the state level, a lot of the regulations for preserved farms is you can only, whatever electricity you produce from your solar, only you have to have 50 of it go to your farm. You can't sell more than 50% on a preserved farm. So just a regulation to be aware of, because it kind of conflicts with, you want to preserve, but you want to let people do what they want to do, kind of issue.
Okay.
That's at the what level?
I believe it's at the county, and I know it's at the state level, because we had farmers who were asking about wanting to put solar on, and from what I remember, 50% was the maximum you were allowed to sell. You couldn't 100% sell all of your solar.
Mason, do you mind investigating if somebody's going to get an ag easement, if there's any other major restrictions like that that we should know about?
Yeah, I mean, that's the only one that I really know of, as far as like a secondary use. Besides, when you put your land in preservation, you always exclude the house and other buildings in an exception area. And sometimes if a winery or someone knows they want to sell products, like the Amish might want to have like a wood shop where they build and sell stuff, they always have to create little 2-acre exception areas that are technically not under easement. They're in the exception area. So that's how you get around it. So you could technically, if you had a 50-acre farm, you could put 5 acres in an exception area and put solar panels there, So there's always workarounds, but yeah, I can ask Jeff at Open Space if there's any other things like that.
Do you want a listing of the crops, Janine, that are grown here?
Yeah, at least
We could send
I
an
guess I
email.
want a general listing of the main farming practices.
Yeah, we'll send an email for those.
Okay. Make a quick note of that.
Is Dave Hawking on? I didn't see him yet.
Okay, so we're going to divide this into main ag use. We're going to divide this into ag-related business, ag tourism, and then I'm just going to write here secondary farm business as a reminder to myself to break these out.
Yeah.
There's also a type of farm, and it's kind of like what we do. It's sustenance, which is basically the produce goes directly into the family. And it's a type of farming, and it depends upon how many people do it. I think a reasonable number of people do it in Franklin Township. So Kathy, I'll defer to you if that's belongs here or not. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, I think homesteading. I love that you brought that up. I think it's homesteading is what we want to call it. You know, where people are surviving off of their property. That's a great idea. You know, in other places, I think it's written as gentleman farming, but you know, I actually like homesteading better.
Weren't we calling some of those? We calling some of them hobby farms too?
Hobby farms, yeah.
Yeah, what
Hobby farm or homesteading. I'll let you guys look into which one is better to have in the plan.
Yeah, the hobby farm thing acts of the wrong vernacular. You know what I'm saying? I think that the homesteading or sustenance farming probably just.
I actually like sustenance farming even better because it hasn't been, but in 10 years from now, it'll be contaminated. But hobby and homesteading are trigger words also. So I think sustenance farming is a great idea.
I stole it off the internet. I looked at that before.
Look at you, Barry. Good job.
Okay, we will add these in and we'll have to break that out. Is there sustenance or homesteading farming happening in the township right now?
Absolutely.
And
Up above,
can
I
just
think you
include that-
want to,
Well, sorry, Chuck, but
up above, I think you want to add hay. Hay's a big crop in the township.
Corn's a big crop. Soybean.
are you gonna say, Kathy can send me the list of everything.
Yeah, I mean, we're on a roll. I mean, we know it's corn, hay, soybeans. What's over there? Hmm?
You guys do triticale? Okay.
Barley.
Dave isn't here. Yeah, or Milo.
Wheat.
Wheat.
But I think we've beaten this one enough. I think
Yeah.
we don't need to list every single thing, right? I think people get the idea.
Yeah.
It changes every year.
Yeah, I feel like we should move on from this first paragraph.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, so then we just have a description of a little bit of background information. And I think Chuck said maybe we could have some references to other chapters. We did start to do that throughout the plan. You know, see chapter 4 sort of thing, so people would know we're not explaining everything in this one chapter. It's easy to think, you know, we should add everything. And I have to say, it was hard to resist. You know, I would write extra things and then erase it. I feel like, no, this isn't the right time. So if there's no background information here that we need to talk about, Nan did send information to me on ag easements. We looked in our database for the county, and then Nan also sent very specific information on ag easements. And that's where this number came from. And that's also where this number came from. The question we had, though, that we didn't see in any of the information that we were handed is are there any farm uses that are preserved through non-ag conservation easements? They're just like regular open space conservation easements that you all know of?
The
Just
Ford
seems
Farm
like-
is not an ag,
What was that?
the Ford Farm is not an ag easement, and it's a farm.
Okay, it's an open space easement.
Yes.
It's a conservation easement. I'm a conservation easement and Kenny takes the hay off of here. The document I sent you, the definitions of the easement came from Chester County. Those are all Chester County definitions.
Right.
But like within the easements, like there's Pearson. There's a piece of Pearson and Paul.
Pearson split.
Yeah, I know, but on the part that's a conservation easement, does he do crops on that?
No, that's a floodplain.
Okay. The
Probably.
fellow that's up near Goodwin, Papa Marcos, I don't know him. Does he do farming on his? Does anybody know? Joan, do you know?
I don't believe he does. I don't think he does. I can check on that, but
Yeah, and Paul Keene, the easement, they farm it, right? They've got a NLT easement on Keene, right?
Yeah, but I can't remember if they got some county farm preservation money or if it was some other source.
Yeah, they did. I can tell you exactly. They got Chester County money and they got money from us and they got money from White Clay.
But what are we trying to do listing them here? I thought.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's a good question. Janine, what do you want? I mean, we don't have to do it here. I can give you what you want,
I
but
think
You can
it's,
give me the- We were just trying to provide background information saying, are there other farms? How many are there that have conservation easements? And then I would list the number of easements and the acres, just like I did here for the ag easements.
okay, it's on the paper that I sent you, so we can talk separately and I'll give you, and I can clarify exactly what you want and you can get the acreage that way. Okay.
yeah, I don't want to list out each farm, but maybe just give the totals. We have so many acres of,
That's what I mean. I was going to do this.
yeah,
See
yeah,
how we just said this many acres and this many easements? The
yeah.
only reason I was writing them down is because if I don't write them down now, I won't write them down.
Well, there's
Okay.
also this, Janine, the big elephant in the room is the Strawbridge Properties farmed. They take the hay off there and I believe that on down by Elk, that Scott plants some corn.
So,
Okay.
So I'm not sure how you want to do all that. Everything is really farmed. I don't think there's anything that's not really farmed. Correct, Paul? Would you agree with that?
other than the floodplain areas, yeah.
Yeah, it's so very little is not farmed, no matter what the easement is.
I would
Okay.
think,
Can I
maybe-
talk to you offline, Dan, then
Yeah,
and just
Absolutely.
figure out which is which?
Yep.
I just want to get a number for kind of a baseline information for everybody.
Right, but rather than focus on the numbers, we should focus on the phrase, which is most all of the farms that are eased in Franklin Township are in farming of some sort. But anyways, let's talk later.
Yeah, because the next sentence says 1/6. I can't read it when she's typing.
1/6 of preserved lands.
Yeah, farms account for once, because I'm with you. Farms account for all the lands. Like what? I guess other than Crossan Park, if that's in the mix, you know.
Yeah, and you add Strawbridge in there, 1/6 is gonna quickly go almost to 100%, so.
Well,
I
that's
think-
just if you're looking at, that's why we asked the question, because that's just if you're, for the casual observer, meaning the average person, probably including residents, they're going to look at ag easements and think ag easements, farmland, 472 acres, done. So they're going to think 1/6 of the property is preserved and is also agriculture. So we're trying to flesh that out a little bit and give what really is happening.
Well, I don't know what the group thinks, but I think it's fair to say that most all of the eased land in Franklin Township is farmed one way or the other.
not all of it, Nan, when you have the open space for the HOAs, like Stonegates has a big chunk of land and it's not farmed.
Yeah, but I don't put HOAs in my numbers. We can take them out.
Okay.
I don't say that that's preserved land. That's just junk land that they, for the most part, except for Stonegate. Anyways,
Well, it's in the
we'll
total.
figure it out. We'll figure it out, Janine.
We'll figure it out. It's in the total numbers. I just want to be clear for people because I want to make sure they understand how much of Franklin is farmed and people understand that through numbers.
Right. Well, it's almost 100%. If you roll down your windows and drive around, we're probably all in agriculture.
Okay, we'll go through it and make sure, any township land and all that is subtracted out of that. Okay, so moving on to then the recommendations and actions. So you have seen the words that are in blue are words that we reviewed October, November, and December. So you have seen these. They just look a little bit different now because now they have other words behind them. So the first category that you all were interested and the community was interested through community input was supporting agriculture as an industry. And we've already talked about the wording on this particular goal, and recommendation. So then there's some background information on why in the world are we doing this and who cares, basically. And some of this definitely comes from the interviews and some of it comes from general planning knowledge and some comes from just the community input in general. But we thought it was important to just explain how we got here. So does anybody have any comments on why we do this before we start into the house?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so you've seen the how word also, the how words. And if you remember during our meetings from October to November, December, everybody was really excited to talk about what hows mean. Well, now we're going to talk about what hows mean. So now is finally the time to do it. So all these words in blue, again, are words that you've seen over and over and over again. These are the things that we have talked about and that CCPC took notes about as we were talking, and then also information that we got through the community process and information, just kind of general planning information. So what you're seeing in these bullets is putting together all the conversations we've had through all the different task force meetings, et cetera, and now putting them into words. So starting out, ordinance measures, picked a couple. None of this, by the way, if you look at the words, none of this is talking about what is called agricultural zoning, which is that 10 to 20 acre zoning that places like East Fallowfield have, places like Highland Township have, West Count has it. None of that is agricultural zoning. This is zoning to support agricultural uses. And it's making sure here there's no barriers to agricultural uses. It's making sure that, and we might be getting too much into the weeds here. This was more for your edification than maybe going into the final plan. I'm just going to put this in a different color because I don't know if this will go into the final plan, but this is more saying if you're looking at the subdivision ordinance, is there anything that's causing a barrier for agricultural uses to continue to thrive? And then you had all specifically asked in zoning and subdivision to come up with a definition for agritourism and agritainment. So we added that in here based on I think that came in the December meeting of feedback. Does anybody have any comments about any of these recommendations? Are they sufficient? Should there be any changes to them?
You use the word barriers multiple times, but I don't see it on the page. Is that a word that we'd want to incorporate, like evaluate? So I'm not going to be bold here and say, the job is to eliminate the barriers, but to minimize them or, I don't know, evaluate them in the context of ag purpose.
Well, she says,
Something like that. That's not worded right, but I understand what you're saying. What? I'm sorry. What did I say? Somebody else says what she says.
yeah, I lost my place.
So the second item, Ag isn't required to even get a building permit for anything. We're pretty, it's kind of the Wild West when it comes to that. So I don't know that we want to further remove.
Well, I think maybe it's just ensure that it is that way and remains that way, Chuck, and that, review other parts of it and stormwater that goes with it. But I think they are, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, you're on the planning commission, but I think if they have electrical in their new structure, they might have to get an electrical inspection, but I'm not positive.
I think if it has a certain number of square feet, over a certain number, 400, I think you need a permit for the building, don't you?
No,
Not if it's ag.
Exemption.
Yeah.
Not if it's ag, okay.
You
Yeah.
need stormwater management though.
Yes.
And then some municipalities wanted, and I don't know how Franklin works exactly. Chuck, maybe you can chime in, and Joan, want to still do full-on land developments for even small agricultural buildings. Is that,
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen anything the entire time I've been on the board, anything like that. And like I say, permits are off the table.
We do require a simple permit just to make sure that setbacks and everything are met. We require a zoning permit just to make
Okay.
sure that they do meet the setbacks. And if it's if it's over 10,000 square feet, then they have to do something with stormwater.
Do they do it at, do they do that at the township level, or who reviews the stormwater, Joan?
Our engineer.
Okay. I mean, my feeling is that it should stay that way. I mean, it seems like it's a little difficult to require everybody else to be doing this for anything and then take it away for ag. I mean,
Chuck, all this is saying is let's review it and make sure we give them as easy path as possible. That's all it's saying, right? The first word is review the provisions. So
I-
maybe we review it and find that we can't relax it anymore, or maybe there's a few tweaks we can make. That's the recommendation.
I'm just chiming in and saying, I don't think that we want to. That's just my opinion.
okay, anybody else have anything to say about this? Do we bag the whole recommendation? Do we keep it in? This recommendation, where it came from in the first place was, remember I told you that I sent all of everything in blue to the Ag Development Council? And by the way, I've sent this entire chapter back to the Ag Development Council because they are the experts on this. And I thought it would just be helpful in case there's anything here that was strange that they thought they should weigh in on. This recommendation did come from them, but it was more of and remember when I did the interview, I interviewed somebody from the ADC. It was more of a general, make sure that you consider this if you're updating the zone or the subdivision ordinance, as opposed to maybe.
Well, I think in our previous meetings, Dave Hawkins had made comments like this.
Oh yeah, he did. That's true.
Yeah, and he's a farmer. I mean, that was his perspective. But I would like to
I think we
keep
should,
it in.
I think we should keep it in because it's a 10-year plan, so it kind of reinforces what we're saying about farmers. So going forward, if they try to make some changes to make it more difficult, it's in the comprehensive plan that we want to, keep it, the unnecessary limiting provisions out of the farmer's life.
Yes, but this paragraph is kind of saying that we should reduce the limitations that we currently have.
No, it says review if there are any.
Well,
Right, I agree with Paul, just if there are any, and we should continue to review it to make sure that there aren't going to be any.
I threw in within the parameters of state law because of everything going on with acre. So I left that in there, and also the MPC, the Municipalities Planning Code, is pretty open, you know, with agricultural uses and where they're permitted and what it means to be an ag use. And a variety of agricultural uses that maybe people traditionally don't really think of ag uses. You know,
Okay, we should move on. We've got 6 more pages. We only have 45 minutes.
Yep. Good call, Nan.
so
This
then,
will come back around again, right? This will come back around so we can kick it around again. Thank you.
right, it'll come back around when we're ready to be
Yeah.
wrapping it up.
Okay.
And you always can think on it. So determine roadway changes. Here's where we get into the roadway change business. So here's some recommendations that we've heard to flesh that out a little bit, or actions to flesh it out. What do you all think of these bullet points? And then also moving on to the next one, coordinating with the ADC, the Ag Development Council, on, you know, promoting and encouraging ag as an industry. They're a great resource. They're starting this economic development strategic plan right now that'll be done probably in a year or two's time. And that should provide a lot of good data for places like Franklin on the situation of ag in the county, but also it's going to provide strategic recommendations on how to assist ag in the county.
Alicia Rodriguez.
Unfortunately, it's not done yet, so we can't add those recommendations in, but it's something to keep on the lookout for. I think that's going to be a really important resource to you all. We've been working on trying to get this plan for a while now, and it's finally a go. So look on that ADC's website to keep track of it.
Should
So-
we add that in there, that once the plan is available, it should be reviewed and see what's applicable to Franklin Township? Do you want to put that in there just as a placeholder?
What's right here? Consult ADC's
Oh, down at the bottom. I'm sorry, I was up above.
for the data and recommendations. I moved on because I didn't hear anybody talking about
Yeah, I got it. I was a little slow.
so I just kept going. Does anybody
So-
have anything about the road one, since I've clearly already moved on?
I do.
Okay.
Can't we take that entire paragraph and put it in roads?
The entire recommendation?
Yeah.
We can. We talked about it in the context before of ag equipment, but yeah, we can do that.
Well,
That's fine.
I would just go ahead and leave it in because there will be some redundancy, but right now it's important to stick it in there. And when you have common threads, just continuing to go through, that just reinforces a point that needs to be addressed. You don't want to lose this whole section of how to transport agricultural equipment and stuff throughout the township. I don't think.
I agree, but if it's not in the roads section, then when somebody's doing something with roads, they're not going to look in the ag section.
I think that it's just brought up here, but there'll definitely be a lot more concrete information in the roads and infrastructure. So it's sort of like a premonition or a foreshadowing of bigger things to come, maybe. That's how I would see it. And it's only comment. You see what I'm saying?
Make sure. Chapter 6. Addresses this topic.
And they'll be linked, Janine, you know, when I look, because Chuck, I agree with you completely. I think there should be a light touch here and then direct the reader to the road section with a link. And
Yeah, that make a single statement and say, go to chapter 6 for more detail.
yeah, because most people aren't going to print this out anymore. They're going to read it on.
But that will take care of Chuck's concerns that we got it in the wrong section.
There you go. Is that good, Chuck?
The cool thing too is when this
Yes.
when this goes on your website, you could also probably hyperlink these sections.
Well, that's what we're saying. Yeah. That
I
way.
mean, even just more than what I'm doing here, you could actually do something much fancier.
You can. Yep.
Sorry, I was typing when you were saying that.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, no problem. I get it.
Okay, so let's move on to, we did the ADC information. I think that's going to be helpful for you. There's this local farm guide that we mentioned, and you all farmers on this Zoom, if you are not in that guide already and want to be in that guide, please reach out to the ADC. They put people in the guide who request to be in the guide. They have so many farmers in the guide already. I think they have 125. They can't solicit. So they wait for people to contact them. So
We're
that's
in
why
it.
it says-
We're in it and we love it. We get a lot of traffic from the guide, which is very nice. It's an excellent marketing tool. So if anybody hasn't done it and they don't know how to do it, I would be happy to help you get connected. The other thing that we did, and I don't know if it goes up to the county stuff, Janine, we had the Chester County Commissioners out here on a farm tour. I don't know if that's all an extension of this whole.
It is.
Okay, good.
That's
Thank
the
you.
EDC. Did Hillary Crumrich come out with you?
Yeah, and Ann Lane
And then-
and
yeah.
yep.
Yeah, every year they do a farm tour. So I don't know if you want to say something about that in here or not.
Well, I just thought it was such a terrific opportunity for the commissioners. They were here, they went over to 1720, we just had them here for the day. And there were about 40 people. I think John Auerbach came. We let him know about it. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, we'll just leave that in there as a placeholder, work on wording for that, but I think that's really a good action.
Yep. Great.
So good. After we get through this first set, then we'll go over to that implementation table. I just want to finish these.
Yep.
We get through all of this. Okay, so the next two, Howells, coordinate with the ag industry, with Kimblesville, and we're going to see chapter 7. We're going to talk about this more in chapter 7, but I think it's important to flesh it out here also a little bit from the ag business side. Kimblesville will be fleshed out from the actually making that a center side. And then we talked about having this annual or biannual charrette with the agricultural industry, so you can get communication just like we're doing through this planning process, but you can continue your communication effort, which I think is crucial. Don't want to have assumptions of what planning should or shouldn't do without talking to the farmers themselves. So then moving on, Kathy, do we want to now go to the matrix next and talk about the priorities, or should we just get through all of these first and then go to the matrix?
Let's get through all these first. We're all warmed up. There's not much more, I don't think.
No, there's not much more. That was the big one. So now we go into ag land preservation, and this is written definitely with the understanding that you aren't going to be floating, another bond. We have talked about that. So just to be clear on that, again, we have the why do this, and then we talk a lot about coordination, partnership, leveraging funds, on and on and on. And the first part has to do with a bunch of coordination actions and how you would coordinate with property owners, land trusts, etc. We talk a little bit about the program that Mason was referencing and the board that runs that program, the county's agricultural preservation, land preservation program. And I think it's important to meet with the coordinator periodically to just discuss potential leveraging of the program and also any other programs that are out there. I think it's fair to say that coordinator's sort of a clearinghouse and understanding how all this works for the county and could definitely help you. And then the new board, we've assigned them all kinds of responsibilities. So the new pro board, which is of course your park, recreation, and open space board, since you don't have really an ag board that deals with these specific issues, that seemed like a good board to maybe tag on agriculture as well. And since Nam was saying a lot of the quote unquote open space, a lot of it may have some element of farming on it, small scale or larger scale farming, it seems like a natural fit for a couple duties of the pro board. And then we go on to talk about how you leverage your funding. And this we added because we heard a lot in the public outreach of how it was important that the property owners and residents, still support the land preservation program. And it was crystal clear they do still support the land preservation program, even if it's not, what it was at one point. There's still great support for that. And then this talks just a lot about more how you would implement a lot of coordination, again, talking to the the Ag Preservation Coordinator. And then this was a recommendation that other municipalities sort of who were in your situation, I guess, 10 to 15 years ago, in a now a different situation, but they went ahead and just created their own land trust. And we gave 2 examples, Pennsbury and then Kennett created their own land trusts. And they don't preserve a huge amount of land through it, but if there's little bits of parcels that they need that are more connections or have important resources that nobody else will take, then they take those parcels. So it's just not that you guys are going to run and do this, but it's a nice tool to just think about, as you go forward, particularly for much smaller pieces of land that may be important.
Janine, how do they fund these land trusts?
Through, well, fundraising, certainly. They function in an odd way. They're an arm of the municipality and they aren't. They're like a quasi arm of the municipality. So the Pennsbury Land Trust is a Pennsbury Township entity, but it also has its own board and it can do its own fundraising, unlike a municipality that can't do fundraising. So it's sort of a way to have a fundraising arm for, conservation. Some of them also fund through, you've already done this. So this horse is out of the barn, proverbial horse is out of the barn, but some, do the open space or the ag referendums and then give that money effectively to the land trust, which is an arm of the municipality to then administer that money. But a lot of donations. Pennsbury Land Trust does a lot of donations. That annual balloon festival, the Hot Air Balloon Festival, the Pennsbury has, that in part largely benefits the Pennsbury Land Trust, for example. So
I do want to put forward, I know Donna had a comment in this particular section.
okay.
Did you receive that? Her comments?
I don't think I did.
I'll make sure that you do. Yeah, it's more of a something to consider. Let me read it aloud here. And then there's also one on the next one. So here, there should be a discussion in the document about the costs to the township associated with land preservation. I agree with describing the other funding sources which have been done here. There has to be recognition that there are limited funds in the township to preserve lands due to ongoing commitments for current land preservation projects, $444,000 for another 3 years, and the open space loan. We can't get it to open anymore from this. I was fighting with it. So, I think we've touched on a lot of it. I'll share it with you, Janine. I don't know if she doesn't have a specific thing here other than the funds are limited. Then her other comment, while we're just in this section, was residents and property owners. That next thing there, it was a question of, give an example of how they could continue to support land preservation programs. The way that her comment is written, it suggests is it financial support or is it like voting to support? I guess what does support mean?
I think it means a variety of things. I mean, one thing it means is continuing to vote to support it. One
Right.
thing it could mean is if you started, for example, this land conservation or this land trust to financially support it. There's also, we'll get to talking about how some of the township properties could maybe be farmed or have like demonstration projects on it. And that might be something that the residents, could help with, depending on what it is. If it's a kind of a community farm or a community garden project, or if it's a, more of a professional farming project.
Yep.
That's something that can be, done. And I think from just a general, and maybe this is more of a touchy-feely recommendation, but just residents and property owners who have full-on ag lands or the sustenance ag lands, just supporting the idea of land conservation in general by considering putting their land in one of the land preservation programs is sort of the ultimate, where the rubber hits the road. Now they're fully, you can't really support a program anymore than putting your land in the program. So I think there's a variety of examples. So we can just do like an EG, like we've done.
Yeah, I think a couple of examples will take care of that one.
Okay, we'll just do what we did in some of the other ones and said, for example.
I thought it was a good comment because I wasn't sure what it meant either, other than I thought voting, like we would support those programs by voting for various things, or people who supported those platforms.
Right. Okay. I could certainly add examples that make sense. So then we talked about holding a farm forum for input. And this would more be getting the word out about these programs and what ASA is. And, there's often misconceptions of what the land conservation does and doesn't do. Mason brought up a really good point when he was talking about the solar farms and what part of solar you're allowed to have on your property and what you aren't. Those types of things could be talked about in this sort of farming forum to really get into the nuts and bolts of what it is and what it isn't, and how it's beneficial and maybe how it's not beneficial to different types of farms and different types of, situations of farming. Explore efforts to expand.
So hang on, for the farming forum, is there a way, because a lot of that stuff can be, if I understand this, you can apply for grants, and if there's money involved to organize these charrettes forums, there might be some support from the county, right, on those things, the financing them if you want to make a sign or.
Yeah, I think that talking to an organization, and we can add this, like the ADC, about how you could do one of these local farm forums, and partnering with other organizations, maybe land conservancies that hold some of these, properties that are more agriculturally oriented.
Yep.
I would bet, well, sorry. Yes.
So two years ago, I remember Jeff Shellington explaining to me how in the Oxford region, they were doing a farmer's market, and they advertised it a month or two ahead of time that he would be there with flyers for the program. And he did a short speech, and it was a mini forum to answer questions to the Oxford region. So, I can ask him about how he got that geared up, got involved. Because it was really effective. The number of applicants after was really high, and the number of questions that we get every week were very low. A lot of the nitty gritty was already taken care of, so it was nice.
Okay, thanks.
And just as another example, I guess also where I got this, or I was thinking of this recommendation, when our office, myself and my colleague, were updating West Coun's zoning ordinance. As part of that zoning update, we actually held a farm forum and brought all the farmers together to talk about what ag zoning was and what ag zoning wasn't. And we did it as part of the project. So that was another, another example.
Well, so we can put you in the action item table. You're going to get one done for us.
Right. Okay, we'll put Mason, we'll talk to Jeff.
Perfect.
Okay, explore efforts to expand, yada, yada, encourage other owners to join the ASA. Of course, you need to be in the agricultural security area before you can apply for ag easements at the county or the state for the state programs. And we talk a little bit about that, and being in the ASA has some benefits against nuisance ordinances and that sort of thing. So we just talk about that. The township already has an ASA, so it's not that big of a deal to join. And then our last set of recommendations has to do with promoting and protecting prime ag soils. And so going into, again, ordinance changes or ordinance considerations for how you would consider or how you would protect these soils. It's difficult because once you start getting to resource protection, you want to protect as many natural resources as you can. But if growth is going to happen somewhere, then growth is probably going to happen on some resource. So it's really a balancing act on which resource is growth going to be able to happen on and which resource isn't growth going to be able to happen on. So that's why there's some of this discussion about net out provisions and this needs to be weighed against other natural resources for protection. And then there's more partnering with the Chester County Conservation District. We talked about this in those October through December meetings and how they could be of assistance and how they do already have requirements for nutrient management plans in place for different levels of intensity of agricultural uses, and then heavily rely on best management practices in those plans and in, I guess, sustainable, farming to balance natural resources with farming, natural resource protection with farming, I'm sorry. And then just encouraging farmers to have up-to-date plans. And I know that's all over the gamut in Chester County for the level of nutrient management plans farms have and how up to date they are, and how some of the nutrient management plans, I guess, impact traditional farming practices is a good way to say it. So there are consultants out there that will help this sort of thing. And one of the people that we interviewed, actually, who's on the Ag Development Council, who used to work for the Conservation District, is now an ag consultant who does this sort of thing to try to help farmers balance good farming practices, getting the most out of the land, and also consideration of natural resources.
Adam Mowry, right?
Adam Mowry, yeah.
He was great.
Yeah, he was really great. He was really helpful. Then we talked about how some of the township preserves could maybe be farmed, and we had a discussion about how one preserve, I think, was farmed with crops or hay crops, but it's not, the crop doesn't seem to be rotated. So what the problems are with that, and how the township could maybe rotate the crop and or use some of the other open spaces to encourage more farming. And then in the December meeting, we added basically a recommendation about, this entire recommendation was added about organic farming at that December meeting. And you all talked about how that would be important to have organic farming and other types of business practices that are really geared towards maintaining those soils. And so we came up with recommendations related to how maybe that could happen. And then getting back to Kathy's original point, tying it all up in a nice knot, then we bring it all back again, Kathy, to the township vision. Remember, you were saying that for the goal. So we relate it all back, and we thought it was good to do this at the very end after everybody's read the whole chapter, relating it all back to why in the world we're even talking about any of this. And then, as I said at the beginning, rather than go on and on and on and on and on, we listed a bunch of other resources that take you right to various websites and bits of information if people want to learn more about any of these organizations, because we could have written 10 pages just on what we have listed here on these websites. And there's really no point when you can just go on the website and look at the information. So I don't think it's necessary to regurgitate everything in this plan. So with that said, it is 7:45, so we will spend the last bit of the meeting looking at this table.
I have a quick question for you, Janine.
Sure.
So I went ahead and I always read through the materials ahead of time. A comment. And so I was wondering, I didn't see any of that incorporated at all in any way, shape, or form. So I just wanted you to clarify, maybe none of it was relevant, or maybe, like, do you understand what I'm saying? Like,
I'm not sure what you're saying, actually.
so you did get the comment that I made in terms of, like, okay, maybe we should consider like zoning, right? In terms of preserving the land, because tract housing does nothing for the farmers. In fact, that was a concern that we've had expressed several times, that a lot of the land just gets used up in non-productive ways. And so if we use up another 200 acres or something like that, we may reach a tipping point, right, at some point. So, I mean, you got my comment, and I was hoping that you would make some sort of, like, maybe we could, you know, apply that here or apply it here, or maybe it has relevance here. But if it doesn't, then that's fine. I'm just so confused as to why it wasn't referenced at all.
Well, when you look back on, we had, if you remember prior, sorry if I'm making anybody dizzy by doing this. We had a fourth recommendation called development pattern originally in this chapter, and that had to do with encourage development in the region, yada yada, appropriate to continuation of ag. And in starting to draft recommendations for that, which we did, it seemed like we were starting to go down the path of the future land use plan. And I'm anticipating most of the future land use plan is really going to center around, you know, 75% of it will center around how development can be made to be compatible with an agricultural and rural community. So just sort of like what I guess you were all saying, should roads be referenced in the ag section? It seemed like the recommendations we were writing started to not have much to do with ag and started to have a lot more to do with development pattern and zoning, and really was getting away from ag altogether. And it just felt like it was going to get repetitive.
Well, I understand that concern, but like a similar comment with the roads is sometimes I think if a point comes up multiple ways, multiple perspectives in a 10-year plan, then that gives it additional merits.
Yeah.
And so I do think that the zoning and how we use the land is very important to the agricultural industry. And I can essentially see how we could ruin the agriculture industry by not doing it. So that's why I also suggested, in maybe consistent with your development pattern comment, that at least some foreshadowing that this is crucial to consider. And maybe then, sure, in the zoning or land use, future land use, I agree, it's going to be handled in great depth. But maybe just a little tag that, look, this is really critical for agriculture because we're running out of land. And that's the main consideration that we have.
So is it fair to say that just like we have something about the roads in here, we should then take the development pattern, put it back in here, but not go nuts with the steps and just make it pretty generalized, just to have it more as a, don't forget about it? Is that a fair statement?
I think that the land is absolutely essential for the agriculture as an industry and the rural character. It's the mission statement. You cannot support that mission statement without sort of touching on how you're going to zone your land. So nuts or not, one, but I would definitely say it needs to be touched on here. And I would like to see some verbiage there about, hey, shift your purpose from tract housing, maybe de-emphasize that and direct your development into areas that feed your vision for agriculture. So anyway, I'd
like to, Barry, you brought this up, I think, at every meeting. This is Paul. I don't want to add that in here. So first, I agree with what you're saying. We want to do that, but the way you're going about it isn't possible. So let me start back up a little bit. Development pattern, encourage development, something. So ag is the main industry. That's an oxymoron, right? If you're encouraging any development, that hurts industry, agricultural industry. Anything that builds on the land really hurts agriculture, right? That's what I'm thinking of. So it's maybe just poorly worded, but that's a difficulty. But then I recognize that we can't stop development. So yeah, we want to plan development in the denser areas. But you've said many times, let's put the high density housing in Kimballsville and then put farm fields elsewhere. The problem is we don't own those parcels or those properties. All we can do is zone for it and hope for the best or preserve it. But if you say we're going to trade 10 houses, put them in Kimballsville, and that would be 10 fewer houses out in the nether regions, that's not how it works. That developer wants those 10 houses in Kimballsville, and the other developer wants his 10 houses out in the nether regions. It's not a one-for-one trade unless you own both parcels.
Yeah, but the zoning is the most powerful tool possessed by, I think, FT.
We are currently zoned as best we can. So if you're saying switch it to 10 or 20 acre zoning, we're not going to support that. That's not possible.
No, I don't think that's what I'm saying, Paul. What I'm saying is I don't know if you read the comment that I said, but it was basically in this direct development in a way that supports your agricultural industry. And that was my point. And again, it can be teased out here and mentioned more in detail later, but I think zoning has to be considered. Like, why would you not approach landowners and say, look, I know you have an LDR track here that's right next to, it's on viable agricultural land. Why would we not approach them and say, would you consider changing this to agricultural residential? Like, that's something.
It's still 2 acres per a house per 2 acres though. Both of those you just said.
And Barry, we have to have a certain amount of different types of zoning in the township. So.
Okay, well, I'm getting a lot of, Joan, I know that we have to have a certain amount, and we're actually well represented with LDR. And I know that the minimum is 2 acres, but that doesn't mean that you have to approve a subdevelopment of 2 acres for everybody's lot. You approve a subdevelopment based upon what's best for the mission of the township.
No, that's not true. I would love to do that, but that owner of that piece of land can put the maximum number of houses on there if they choose to. We can't change that. And we can wish it away, but we can't zone it away.
I think the best you can hope to do is encourage clusters and with open space preserved. Is that right, Paul?
Yeah, that's one method that can be used. In certain parcels, it's better than others because sometimes they leave the open space as the trash land that couldn't have been developed anyway. And then they put more houses than they could have if we had forced them into doing a regular housing development. Do you see what I mean there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I guess
be careful. If it's all flat land, then I agree. Then that's the way to go. Cluster leaves nice open spaces.
I want to clarify too that other municipalities in Chester County and, a couple I've worked in, I don't think it's the right phraseology to say zone away, but Franklin has specifically expressed that you are not interested in what's called agricultural zoning, which is this 10 to 20 acre zoning. But there are ways to do exactly what Barry's saying. You can't do it in the entire municipality, in the entire township, obviously, but there are ways, and there are other communities that have selected to have that 10 to 20 acre zoning in areas of their community so that they do not get developed with traditional tract homes.
We haven't been successful in that, and we've been threatened with lawsuits for that. And then I'm
not saying you guys want to do it. I'm saying that there are other avenues, but it sounds like that's not something Franklin wants to do. So it sounds like it's a no starter in Franklin.
So my understanding though, Janine, is it doesn't stand up in court.
It completely stands up in court.
Pennsylvania ruled that you need to have 2 acres, right?
Oh no, for agricultural zoning, 10 to 20 acres stands up in court.
Yeah.
If you want true agricultural zoning where you have 10 to 20 acres and not, like pretend.
So let's take a 50-acre parcel and we tell that landowner, okay, you're now 20-acre ag zoning, that's a taking, right?
It is not. You're allowed to have ag zoning. It's held up in Pennsylvania.
That's right.
There are recent court cases where agricultural zoning, I'm not talking about a 4-acre lot, which isn't agricultural zoning. I'm talking about true agricultural zoning where you're saying you have 10 to 20 acres, which is the 10 acres is the state minimum to get into, clean and green, 319, 513.
No, I still don't understand. How is that not a taking from the landowner?
Because agriculture is a legitimate use in Pennsylvania and the municipality is zoning so that agriculture can be the legitimate use in Pennsylvania. So you are choosing a lot size, which is considered in Pennsylvania.
Right, but now that landowner can sell his land for less than he could if it was 2-acre zoning.
It is absolutely not a taking in Pennsylvania. There are court cases, there are relatively recent court cases. In fact, there was one in Bucks County not that long ago where it absolutely is not a taking in Pennsylvania. And it's a choice that other communities in Chester County and the Philadelphia region have, done.
But you said they did it because the farmers agreed to it ahead of time, correct?
Some of them did it for that reason. West County is an example for that reason, yes. Others have had it in place. I can't even remember how long East Fallowfield's had agricultural zoning in place. It's been in place for a long time.
Yeah, a lot of them have ag zoning, like London Grove has ag zoning, but you can still put a house every 2 acres. They call it ag zoning, but that's a joke.
Well, not all, some of them actually have, like West County has agricultural zoning where you can't put a house every 2 acres.
Well, I think you've missed my point though. If we switch it to 20 acres, that farmer gets less than if he had 2 acres zoning. And yes, what Nan just said, if we get a pre-agreement from the landowner, that'd be awesome. I would jump on that.
Well, that's why it isn't proposed in here, Paul, because we already decided a while ago, months and months ago, that wasn't for Franklin.
Right.
I was just trying to shed light into this conversation to tell Barry that there are ways to do it, but it's not something that Franklin Township and the feedback was that we want to do. So that's why that's why we just skipped the topic altogether and moved on to other topics, because there was no point going into it if it wasn't something, you all wanted to do, move on to other stuff you do want to do.
But I think if we want to go ahead and do what Barry's talking about, I think it's out of the realm of the task force to do it. I think instead the word should be that it should be investigated after the task force is done by a planner and the Board of Supervisors to see if there's way to do agricultural zoning. I think it's way over our heads to make any sort of decisions, 10, 20 acres, any of that. It's a very technical and slippery slope zoning is. And it takes professionals and the Board of Supervisors to agree to do something like that.
That's a fair statement.
Okay, well, I definitely appreciate Janine, your comments, and that's kind of what I was looking for is something other than just opinions. I was looking for some facts and some rational arguments as to why we're just not doing it, because we do represent Franklin Township and I am a member of Franklin Township and I'm saying, hey, this is important to consider. I agree with Nan that it's tough. And Paul also, I agree it's a slippery slope. It's very tough, but sometimes the important decisions are tough. And so maybe we can put in a comment here like Nan suggested, but it should at least be considered. That's what I guess I'm arguing for is some consideration for an important topic, especially if it's got precedent in adjacent townships in Chester County itself. I don't want to lose an opportunity there. So anyway, thank you, Janine, for filling in some facts. I appreciate it.
So in the interest, before we get into the implementation table, question number 1 for you all is, should this development pattern, action-oriented topic area, should it be put back into this chapter? That's the first question. And it's fine. If we're going to do that, I'm fine with doing that. I just want to get feedback from you all.
I would say no. This is Chuck.
I would say yes.
It goes somewhere else, right? Is that what?
Well, it's going to be talked about in the future land use chapter.
Land use chapter, right?
Yeah, I think it goes in land use, not in agriculture.
Well, can't we treat it like roads where we lightly touch on it here and then direct the reader to
We can.
zoning, so it's all parked in the same? And I love the word investigate because I think that's a consent, that I think we can all get agreement around that word, Barry, and Nan, that, yeah, lightly touch on it here and ask that they investigate, this ag zoning. I think that's probably the best that we can do in the comp plan.
I think that's the question for the consideration, and that's what I would say yes to. Yay, yay is put some touch on here in the development pattern in the ag section.
Yeah.
Like on it. And so I vote yes for that. I don't vote for a full, nuts version, but definitely the touch on.
Okay, that's fair enough. So we can go ahead and do that. So next time you see the chapter, it'll have that added back into it.
All right. In my head, I'll call it the Barry sentence.
We'll call it the very sentence. So in the last 28 minutes, short of this topic, which we're not going to prioritize right now, but let's go into our matrix. And so what we have in this matrix, again, is we're going to identify stuff as A, meaning act on. And this is just trying to keep it as simple as possible language-wise. Act on within 2 years, at least start on in 2 years, meaning this is something you guys really want to do, and we're not in the point of considering it anymore. We're ready to go on it. C is, it sounds like a pretty good idea. We're not really sure. Let's start in 3 to 5 years. It's important to us, but we're still thinking about it, or we don't have time, or we don't have money. E is, we really like the idea, but we need more information to even consider acting on it. And then O is just stuff that you have going on already, or you would like to begin having going on all the time. So those are the general topic area, or the general prioritization, and that would be filled in this when column. And then again, by who would be the primary organization or entity in the township, who would be, and this should probably be, primary would be in the township, and then partner could be another organization in the township, or it could be an organization outside of the township. So now that we're all very familiar with the recommendations and the actions and all of that. So for example, the first one we talked about under support ag as an industry, consider ordinance measures to further support agriculture. Obviously the planning commission would be the primary organization within the county, or within the township to do this. I don't know if you would have a partner entity when you update Franklin Township zoning. I'm not really sure what your process is for doing that and how you go about doing that. If there will be somebody else you would partner with, or if you just want to leave it at the PC right now. And obviously the Board of Supervisors, they're only going to be listed here when they're going to be the primary, because obviously the Board of Supervisors, and this will be said in the text, they're involved in all these decisions. So it just takes up space in the table to write Board of Supervisors in every single recommendation. That's a given.
So your point is that when it says PC, it's fully understood that the Board of Supervisors instructed the PC to do it?
Yeah, the Board of Supervisors is going to instruct everybody to do all of this.
Yeah.
And
okay.
when we talk up here in this whole description and how this all works, that will be one of the, in all these words, that will be one of the things that's talked about. That's just a given.
Okay.
Otherwise, every single recommendation is literally going to be this PC / oh gosh, I can't see the slash anymore. It's too dark in here. BOS. They would all look like that, which is fine. It's just
Awkward.
Yeah, it's just unnecessary. So then to determine roadway changes needed for larger agricultural equipment, yada, yada, yada. Who in the township, and maybe Joan can weigh on this too, who would primarily probably take the lead on that sort of recommendation?
That is something that I would bring up with, not that I take the lead, but I would bring up with our engineer for him to evaluate that. So I don't,
Okay, so you would probably bring up that subject and the engineer, and then, I mean, I think we would have also like kind of the ag community.
well, that's who would bring the need to me. I would anticipate someone would call and say, hey, there's a problem with this road. We can't get our farm equipment through. We need to start looking at doing this or that to the roads. And then would approach the engineer.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, even the idea, we had talked about this in one of our past meetings, the idea of the township even starting to do sort of, or maybe forming a committee out of this group, doing inventory of sorts and working with the local ag community and figuring out, doing an inventory of where all the problems are, but then really prioritizing what are the major problems in the major thoroughfares. And if those thoroughfares could be improved in some ways, is it like an 80-20 rule where you could get a lot of assistance for farmers by improving just a couple areas for the, I guess, the short term?
This is a slippery question though, because the other thing that people wanted was to keep the character of our roads the way they are. So there's a push and a pull. So I think this should be in roadways. This should be a greater discussion than simply short circuiting it through ag. It's a balanced question.
Well, it's going to show up in roadways also. So we'll cross-reference it to roadways. I agree. Because if any roadway improvements are going to be done, part of one of the questions, I think there's two elements to it. One is if a roadway improvement is proposed, agricultural industry needs should be considered in some capacity in that roadway improvement. But I think from the other perspective is the township needs to know from the ag community and also generally from just the perspective of other sorts of uses for the roads, whether it be on-road cycling or the buggies that we talked about. The township should already have an idea from the agricultural, the buggy, and the cycling community of where these improvements will be most beneficial. So when a roadway improvement is proposed, the inventory and the input is already relatively known at that point. So I think it's almost two sides of a coin. I think it needs to show up to be effective. I think it needs to show up as something important in both sections, because it's going to have to come. We're going to have to come at this from two different angles to make it successful.
Does it matter if the roads are state roads or township roads?
Not for this part of the exercise, no, because if state road improvements coming up, they would probably notify Joan. And if Joan had the information already sitting on her desk saying, look, we talked to our farmers, et cetera, we had this whole charrette, we had this whole inventory, and this is what's important to us. It could even be as simple as these 3 signs need to be moved when you do this road improvement because they're smacking the farm, the farm equipment smacking them, or cyclists are smacking into the signs or whatever. But yeah, I think it can be township road and state roads, both.
I agree. We have input with the state roads.
Okay, so coordinate with the ADC on ways to help keep the ag community viable and interconnected with the township. Who would probably take the lead on this type of thing? Would this be that new pro board, or? I guess this would be looking for a liaison to keep the lines of communication open with the ADC.
Let's put the pro board in there for right now to keep moving. And should we be applying your act on, consider acting on, explore? Where do we put that in the last column?
That goes on the last column. Yeah, I was going to try to get through at least a couple of these in
Okay, that's
And-
fine.
section before, to get everybody thinking about it before we try to prioritize them.
Yeah, it's okay. All right,
This is actually the easier of the two.
gotcha.
Prioritizing them is not particularly always easy.
Okay, so the pro board,
Yeah, the pro board. And then I think this annual charrette, I think that would be a cool thing for the pro board to do. I sort of see them as the first line of communication for property owners of all varieties
mhm,
for the township.
good.
Sort of like how the historical commission functions right now as a line of communication, like a liaison.
Yep.
Okay, and let's get through one more section here and then we'll look at prioritization after you start to think about, what these are and what you really want to do here, what's most important to you to do. So then we're moving on to the land preservation efforts. So we have this continuing to coordinate with property owners. I think this is just, well, I mean, I'll just fill in, this is going to be ongoing. So we're just going to put an O here. I don't think this is going to be a
Mm,
start or stop kind of thing. Who would be the primary entity, though? I guess that's too far. Who would be the primary entity in the township, though, that would probably take the lead on this type of coordination? Who does it right now, if anybody?
Has it been the board historically?
Well, previously it was the Open Space Committee, and since we don't,
Pro board.
Would it make sense for us to fill this out as homework for our next? And
Good, if
then,
you want to.
then you could see, well, 4 people said this, 1 person said that. Well, does everybody agree what 4 people said is the way to go?
How
Yeah, we
many,
could certainly do that instead of, and then we could end this meeting early.
how many more rows are there? Hmm.
Just that many, not that many. But yeah, if you all want to do it as a homework assignment, I'm fine with getting off the meeting.
Just, you're not getting a lot of input.
Yeah, I agree.
And maybe you could also, Kathy could then pass that by the board because they kind of wanted to put some input into this, and that would be a point where they could be useful.
Yeah.
Well, I think you all giving ideas to the board could be useful as well. I think it's a both. I think they're both good. I think I like the homework idea. And then I think it would be kind of interesting to see what you all come back with in this when category. And I could give this, if you all have Word, maybe we could just give you the table in Word so that you could fill it in more easily rather than in a PDF.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, well, Kathy, you as the task force chair, do you want to try to do whens, or should we just make this whole table a homework assignment for people?
Let's make the whole table. And then you know what I'll do with Joan, Nan, maybe put together, a little crib sheet of who the potential whom's could be, just to help us, code together.
Here,
Where are they?
right here.
Yes, perfect. Yeah. So
This
we'll
may not be the sheet. This is, the question marks are just ideas that,
yeah, but let's
Right here.
click that. Let's make sure that rides along with it. If are you sending us this whole thing?
I could send you the whole thing. It's easier, if that's easier.
Yeah, let's do that. And then we have these codes that we can, drop in there and see how we all come out.
Okay.
Can you explain the first column? Go
What?
back down. Keep going. There, how to. What are you looking for there?
You don't have to fill that in. We're not going to do that right now. That'll come from the, the bullet points. So for example, this will say zoning and or SLD. Whoops. That's an example of what that'll say. I'll fill that in I didn't fill that in because I wanted you all to look at the bullet point words first before filling this in. But it would just be these areas that I'm great. These areas would be basically the homework assignment.
So a lot of times partner, we would just end up with nothing in that category. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, for example, this might be the ADC would be the natural partner because it's saying coordinate with the ADC. The partner here would be probably, the ag industry. So yeah, there may be instances where there's no partner and then we just put, kind of that sort of thing, or NA. But it's really who in the township would be responsible for getting this action going.
Right.
So I think at your February meeting, you had a discussion about creating committees, whatnot, to how to get this all started. Somebody, once Chester County Planning isn't here anymore, somebody in the township is going to have to then say, these are good recommendations, and X committee, et cetera, is going to get started on these recommendations. And then X committee, for example, the pro board is then going to reach out to the ADC, to Hillary Kremrich, and say, hey, we want to talk to your board about brainstorming ideas that we could start to, implement as our pro board to help the ag community, and what we can do to help just as a voluntary board in the township.
Yeah, and Janine, you weren't at that meeting, but and just to remind everybody, we had discussed the role of subcommittees within existing committees. So, there was a discussion not to add more top level committees, like what are referenced up in the grid up higher in the document, but that there would be potentially subgroups. So we didn't get to like naming names for subcommittees. So I think when we fill this out, if you envision that it's the PRO and that it's a subcommittee off of the PRO, you should just call that out, especially if it's one that you're interested in, doing.
Okay. I think that makes sense. And I don't know if in the comp plan we need to get into the having subcommittee conversation. We might just say the PRO, and
That's fine. Yeah.
that may be more of a township administrative concern on how that works.
But just to connect the dots with everybody from what we had discussed in February, not establishing new committees, but trying to find a home within an existing committee.
Right, because you do have several committees that could probably meet a lot of these needs. And then if you don't, then you establish a new committee, but don't go into it thinking you're going to establish a new committee. I agree.
Right.
You don't need more committees that are not sure what, they're going to be doing. Populate your current committees. And then if no one else has any comments, I want to take the last, as we put in our agenda, the last bit of time to welcome public comment and then Board of Supervisors comment. On any or all of this?
Yes, John Auerbach. I have some comments if you want to take those now.
Sure. Hi, John. How are you?
Very good. Just as a matter of terms, I heard some terms, solar and wind farms. That's really a misnomer, and we ought to avoid that term because these are both electric generation facilities and have nothing to do with farming. So they got to be solar arrays and wind something or else. I don't know what else you'd call them, but that's just a misnomer, and we shouldn't promote that term. It's just a minor point, but just for related to crops, on our farm, we grow corn, winter wheat, soybean, orchard grass, and wood. Related to the road issues for farm equipment, the biggest issue is overhead clearance by restrictions created by vegetation, and that's easily solved. Making the roads wider is just completely impractical, really, because the width of the farm equipment, a combine takes 2/3 or 3/4 of the width of the road. There's no way to accommodate that by adjusting the road. So the overhead clearance is the primary issue.
John, if I could add to that, it's when we had Dave Hawking on here, his comment was when we do traffic calming, like they plan to do in Kimblesville and like they've done in West Grove, he said that really screws them over because the island's in the middle and the curbing so close. makes it so his 2/3 width combine can't physically fit down the street. So that's what he was referring to.
He's right, right. Generally, their issue is overhead clearance, and we monitor that at least once or twice a year. We make sure we get 15 feet. Sometimes we need more than that. The township's been responsive to that, so that's been the primary issue over the time I've been on the board. Let's see, just another issue related to the comp plan. There's a lot of good ideas going in here and a lot of discussion, but I think you have to put it in perspective that the comp plan is not law and it's not enforceable. It's really a policy statement adopted by the board as a resolution. So if you really want something to happen seriously, you got to change the zoning. The zoning is the law. That's enforceable, but the comp plan is not. So the only other comment I give you on the zoning is our zoning is probably as restrictive as we can get it for the purposes that this group's been talking about for quite a while. 75% of the land is zoned for ag, or probably 78%. It's a significant number. But we're right on the edge of being challenged by in a court of law. You might put a restrictive zoning ordinance in there and it'll lie there for years and years until some landowner decides that it's too restrictive, and they'll sue you with a curative amendment. All the ones that have been lodged on Franklin have been successful in the past, so it's not unlikely that it could happen. But I think we're probably about as restrictive as we can get with zoning. The only other issue I'd say, just something I encountered recently talking to a pole barn supplier, Graber up in Christiana, and their comment was that the stormwater compliance related to one of these pole barns is about 50% of the cost of the building. It's really changed their business significantly. Just a reference point. The only other thing is related to real estate deals. All real estate deals are negotiable. And if you're in a hurry, you don't get the best deal. The best deals come to you when you wait. Don't think I have any other comments. There's just some things I jotted down as I listened to the conversation tonight.
John, what do you mean by wait? What do you mean by wait? I didn't understand your last comment.
The deals come your way. The deals come your way with a landowner approaching the township rather than aggressively going out there and soliciting real estate. That's where you get into trouble and you pay a whole lot more money. That was a policy that took place in prior years in the township, and the township spent a whole lot of money, overspent on properties. So in the last, quite a number of these properties came to the township at no cost or low cost. We had one property, 55-acre farm that we were negotiating with the owner, and we were hesitant about it. And eventually the property owner took the county's money and preserved it on their own. The township did not get involved in it. And we got the benefit of that by sitting back and being a little resident. That whole property on 896, the Handler property, which was originally zoned at TND, that eventually was zoned with an ag easement with almost no input from the township. All the township did was watch it. Couldn't develop as it was, and the developer just wanted out and sold the development rights as an ag easement. So there's a benefit for waiting and being careful.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
John, you said when you were talking about legal proceedings regarding how close we are on our ag, you said successful, but I don't know which way successful was.
I'm sorry, could you clarify it a little more?
You were referring to whether or not we were being sued regarding.
Oh yeah, the plaintiff was successful, and the township was on a losing end. Okay. Most of those curative amendments are successful. Okay. We had one. In fact, there's a development just north of us on Guernsey Road, Lexington Point. That's a result of a curative amendment where the developer sued the township for a higher density zoning and was successful. So, okay. Most of the time, when they go after you in court, they know they're going to win, and they do. So just a point of experience.
Don, I got to speak up again. You always say that the land on Kimballsville Curve happened with you just sitting back, but you failed to acknowledge the 12 years of lawsuits and really hard work by the supervisors through those 12 years, and us putting that developer, those 3 developers, into a corner with crafty ordinances, well laid out zoning, not giving an inch, and making sure they were put in a corner. And then at the right time, the market collapsed, and you got damn lucky that they preserved it, because it really could have got ugly. So for you
Well, I
to say
think-
you sat back and got it, that's not true. You sat back. We worked hard.
The overriding reason for that being developed was the collapse of the subprime mortgage market in 2007. The entire housing market just fell apart then, and that's really what put that developer in a position where he wanted to get rid of the land.
Okay.
I'd like to make a comment. John, I've read the Board of Supervisor minute meetings from 2012 to present. You're very anti-open space. And I think people should keep that in mind when you talk about open space. The people in Franklin Township really value open space. It is why they moved here. They've made it abundantly clear. You are not for that, John. We need to remember that about you. You're not going to help with the open space, keeping land undeveloped at all. And our residents want us to be creative and try and preserve the land that is not developed. Whereas you would prefer to have it developed, get a house on it, get those tax dollars, which down the road will cost us money, but you don't acknowledge that. But I want people to know that. And if you don't believe me, go back to all the Board of Supervisor minute meetings.
Yeah, hang on.
2012, and it's very obvious. So
Mary,
let's just
appreciate
remember that going forward.
Yeah.
Mary, you're making a very strong political statement. I disagree with it.
Yeah, I want to actually dispense, and part of this conversation I think just happens in another forum. We have a very collaborative group here working on content that has meaning for all of us. So
And Kathy, I agree with you. Sometimes I just get a little upset.
Okay,
when we get
well,
slammed all the time about open space and how we did everything.
I'm just asking you to take it
That's all.
somewhere else.
That's what just gets me upset.
Yeah, I'd like you both to just take it somewhere else. So
Okay.
yeah, don't turn it off. I love it. Just take it somewhere else. Thank you. We'll close this. We have some homework. So
Kathy?
Yeah.
This is Paul Agassi. I just have 2 quick comments.
Oh, okay.
Way back at the beginning, since I was sitting and listening quietly and not butting in, when talking about any future growth with respect to agriculture and how the vision is that future growth should facilitate agriculture. I can't remember the exact wording now. Any is now, I think, superfluous when you've changed it to future growth. I think if you go back and look at that,
Okay.
it's very, 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 very far back at the beginning.
You went right back to the beginning, Paul. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know. I made a note and now
Okay.
at the end.
All right, we'll
And
take a
then
look at that.
one other thing I would quickly note is closer to home, if the township does consider a land trust at some point, London Britain has had a land trust since 1999. And so they would be a resource to talk to.
Oh, good. Okay.
I can't tell you anything about their land trust, but I know they have one that's been functioning and doing a variety of things.
That's helpful. Thank you, Paul. Good tip. All right, so we want to end on a positive note here. We all have a little bit of homework. So I will distribute the Word document and highlight the grid that has the committees in it and the table. And I like this exercise. We'll all put our own assumptions in there, and then we'll compare. And that way, what we are not in agreement on, we'll discuss. Janine, the next meeting, will we have what's coming up next?
So 2 things. One is after this meeting, Kathy, I'm going to send you this document we're looking at right now, because
Yep.
there was some information you wanted to fill into it, like Donna's comments and
Yep.
I think some other information. That's the first thing. The next thing is we are going to be talking next month about natural resources as green infrastructure. And then the related topic will be that whole trail, the whole trail topic, trail and pedestrian. And I think because your natural resources, your preserves, you know, all of that stuff is really directly involved in walking around the township. I sort of see them as all interrelated,
Yeah.
more so than some of the other topics. So we should be having our transportation planners join us next month because they've been working with myself and others to try to put together in the background this whole the pedestrian ideas for the trails and then the walkways in Kimblesville. So they'll be joining us for that aspect. And otherwise, the natural or the resources infrastructure, that will be more of a chapter like you've just seen now.
Okay. So then for the next chapter, can I request that it be sent in Word? And then if you want my help, I'm used to consolidating comments from lots of different stakeholders, you know, that we can put them all in together. And that way, when you're showing it on the screen, we can have the shout outs already of people that have commented. I know that will make things go faster, because we do want to keep these to 2 hours, the meetings, no
Well,
more
I'll
than.
just send it to you in Word, and then you can
Yeah.
you'll be the one to disseminate it to other
Yes.
people and then get back.
Yes.
Okay. It's kind of
Yep.
the clearinghouse for comments. Okay.
Yep.
We have a little more lead time than we did with this document.
Yes. We apologize for that.
Thank you, Jerry.
Kathy, we need to get our homework back well before the meeting so that you can do a count.
Yes. So today is Tuesday, the 23rd. I was just going to look at a calendar. When I send it out, I'll give you guys, how about we aim to get this done before Easter, which is April 4th. So 2 weeks. Well, I'll give it 2 weeks from tonight. I mean, we're all warmed up, so let's do 2 weeks, and that way I'll consolidate it and give it back to Janine. So April 6th, it'll be due. That sound good?
Sounds good.
All right, thank you.
Great. Everybody,
right.
thank you so much.
All right.
I will be emailing.
Thank you,